Okay.
Friends, family, fans, we are live for another episode of Back 9 Bets, episode 13, the maker of Reigns. We've got a good friend of mine from the Win Daily crew and the PGA draft cast that happens on Tuesday nights at 9 Eastern. And his name is Draftmaster Flex, aka Joel, and he is a maker of Reigns. So that's why we've got him on the show. And he's a big advocate of the ReignMaker stuff as I am. And we are going to be talking to you all about the beautiful world of ReignMakers. Joel, how the heck are you?
I'm awesome. I am really enjoying me some ReignMakers. It's been a fun start. For people who are like into PGA, but maybe haven't gotten to ReignMakers yet, it's a lot of fun. And again, it definitely is a little intimidating at first. Like, I don't really get it. What am I getting myself into? There is a route where you can start slow, kind of feel it out, and then kind of expand. But once you get into it, I guess my biggest caution is it can be addicting.
I got in with a $23 lineup, and I think my total player pool is sitting at 2K now. So I've lost control. I've lost complete control. And I've had to start selling cards now because the bank account it's taking a beating, but it's also an investment at the same time. I keep telling Mrs. Maniac that. So if she sees the odd $250 deposit go to DraftKings every now and then, it's not because I'm losing, it's because I'm investing. So that's what you need to tell the missus if she is on your case about that. So yeah, dude, it's so addicting.
And what I'll add to that is one thing I go back and forth on all week is, same thing happens to me. I bought way more cards than I planned to, and now my roster is loaded. And then I'm kind of like, well, I could sell a bunch of guys that I don't want and just make some of it back. But then I'm looking at the marketplace. I'm like, well, Billy Horschel's not playing this week. So if I sell him, I probably am going to make less than if I just wait till the tournament he's playing in and somebody wants him. And so it's like, do I sell him now and just take the money? Or do I wait to optimize, a week where he might be a top 10 player in a tournament and I'll get an extra $50 to $100? So what's the play?
That is the beauty of this. There's short-term plays, there's medium-term plays, there's long-term plays, and there's a whole bunch of strategy before you even enter your guys into contests too. That's like the beauty of it to me is it's like stock market, but it's also, not exactly the same as it, but there's a lot of principles that you can apply from, trading essentially. There's a marketplace, so that's trading for sure. So I love that idea. Like I've got some Tyrrell Hattons that I have at a pretty hefty price that if people don't take this week, I'm going to be okay with. But if someone snags him, I've doubled my money on a Tyrrell Hatton card. So
he's a great example for this week where it's like, if you don't love Tyrrell Hatton and you have his card, now's the time to sell him because he's the best player in the tournament. Not really a sure thing he'll ever be the best player in the tournament again. His value is peaking right now. So unless you really have like a great lineup for this week that you really want to go after and play him in, fine. But if not, you'll probably make a decent profit off your Tyrrell Hatton if you sell him before this tournament.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of this, dude. It's about finding your time to get into the market and selling those guys. So talk to me more about how you've started to build a player pool and how you managed to take down a freaking contest, dude. That's like the crazy part about this.
Yeah. So I went into it like, let me just roll something out that is going to basically be competitive with what I have. I wasn't going out to like buy cards. I wanted to see like basically what I got from the opening pack, stuff like that. And I put very little into the first week. I had a good week one. I made, a couple $100, something nice. And then week two, I was like, well, it's attainable. And then at the Valspar, what it was, there was overlay. It was barely full. And so I was like, well, with overlay, I can definitely gonna make money. It's worth investing in this tournament. So that's when I went out and said, let me go buy the lineup I want. And it was easy to do at the Valspar because yes, they had JT, but after JT, like Spieth card wasn't available. So like that wasn't an option. Nobody could have played him. So now it's like going out and buying what my personal optimal lineup wasn't that expensive during that tournament because they weren't talking studs. It was still very new. I went out and got the guys I wanted.
Yeah.
Taylor Moore, right? Steven Yeager.
Those are some great plays.
Being the optimal lineup and ended up winning the whole tournament.
That's so awesome, Joel. So tell me, are the majority of your cards rares or elites, or like what is your avenue and why did you decide to kind of pursue those cards versus, different rarities?
So I've gotten now, and this was something I thought about for a while. It was a tough thing. I started out in rare. I wanted to compete in rare. I was building a rare roster. After winning 15K and kind of getting some momentum, I went up to elite because
Yeah.
there's significant, you're competing with way less people in the elite. So if you can get a competitive elite roster, and that's the key word, competitive, right? If you're gonna just, if the best you can roll out is Cameron Percy, it's fine, but you're probably not going to expect to win many tournaments. But if you can get a competitive elite roster, the odds of you being able to take down a tournament are way better because there's significantly less people entering those tournaments.
Correct. And I think from what I've noticed looking at the card values, if you pounce on a value NFT 2 or 3 weeks in advance, the value of that card in the elite rarity range it's a much bigger increase than in the rare section. Like your profitability margins are much higher the more you go up there because it's less cards, less people, and those contests are not as full. So if you're just going up against a few hundred people versus a few thousand people, that makes a massive difference. So I'm trying to get myself in the same boat, but I've obviously spent far too much on the rares. But for some people that I know, we've got Spence in the chat here, who's a big fan, obviously, of Jason Day. And shout out to Tee of Sports there. We'll get into some Jason Day. I think he's one of the guys we'll talk about once we get into everything. But you've got in the elite contest selections area, like for the contest for the elite cards, you only need 3 elite cards in order to get into those contests, right?
So that is correct. And the same, concept applies with rare. So with elite, you need 3 elites, 2 rare, but your elite has to be your captain. One of the elites has to be your captain. With a rare, you need 4 rares, 1 core, but one of your rares have to be your captain. The reason I highlight that is because for those of you getting started, to win one of these tournaments, you're going to need one of the better golfers, right? You're going to need one of those top guys. And if you don't want to spend too much, you can always make, like if you're going for a rare tournament, make your top guy a core, whoever it is, Scotty Scheffler or Rory, because they're not going to be as expensive, but you can make them that one player in your rare lineup that kind of fills out the roster.
Correct. And when you're looking, because then you're going to be buying a core card that's got like 3,000 editions or whatever. And if you're entering into a single entry, I think it's important to try and find a good Scotty or a Rom that's got like a low edition count and spend an extra $5 or $10 because the difference between that and a rare is much smaller. So get that low edition count if you're doing the single entries. But if you're just going to be doing, like, I'm a big fan of the bankroll builder ones where it's like a 3 entry max. It's basically like a cash game. And you just got to get your guys through the cut basically to start cashing there. And you don't need essentially to chase those edition counts because a tie is just going to bump you down a few spots where you're still going to be making the same amount of money. It's a flat payout in those contests. So end edition counts don't matter as much. Whereas in the single entries, when you're trying to take down a GPP for a, like 10K or whatever, 15K, Lord knows you don't want to have spent $5 too little and got a bad edition count. And then you tie with some guy and then your 10K goes to like 2.5 because the problem with some of these contests is they're very top heavy. So if you hit the nuts, you are in good shape. But if you don't, you're still going to make some cash, but it's not as nice of a flat payout as some GPPs that we play in, right?
That's totally true. And more importantly, even too, while of course you're going for the top prize and you want to be the big winner. But one thing to keep in mind with this is there's no, like, other than the fact you have to have the cards, there's no entry fee. So anything that you make is just gravy, right? So theoretically, if you're smart about how you purchase your cards, you could purchase some cards, put it on a lineup, even if you make $100, and then you can sell your cards and just be $100 richer if you don't want to maintain and stay in this because there was no entry fee, there's no loss, and the cards don't lose value immediately. Yes, they're going to fluctuate week to week based on the tournament and who's playing and things like that. But the thing to keep in mind is when you buy a card, that money is not gone, right? That can be sold again in a week or two, and you can make that money back. So I think about that a lot. And the biggest value to add to that is the top guys aren't going anywhere, right? They're going to be valuable the next tournament, the next tournament, the next tournament. Whereas if you want to look back, let's just use last week's Punta Cana as an example. Matt Wallace, I loved last week, right? Played him. He was a great pick. He's not going to be super valuable for, tournaments later in the year, his price is going to plummet. So if you don't want to get stuck with Matt Wallace and what you spent on him, you got to sell him before a tournament like now, after he won and he's playing again, because 4 weeks from now, the value of Matt Wallace, I can't imagine is going to be anywhere near what it is now.
Right. Because so another interesting, I'll pull up my model here in a little bit because let me just do it right now. Then we'll pull up the model a little bit because I've got rankings for long-term and short-term, where long-term rankings don't include the power rating for a golfer in that event. So the short-term, you can see like Tyrrell Hatton is 4th in the short-term rankings because he's playing this week. But I've got him ranked as like the 10th golfer in my long-term power rankings because he's still a good golfer, but just the fact that he's one of the only few top guys here playing this week makes him that more valuable this week, like we've been discussing, right? So this is just a numeric way to describe this. But what you want as well is Matt Wallace's priority ranking now, because also you want guys that are going to be playing regularly. I just sold an Aaron Badley whose priority ranking is pretty poor. Like he's always on that alternate list. I don't want a guy who's maybe going to play in the event. You know what I'm saying? I want a guy that's going to have constant starts. And then I also want guys that Max Homa in particular has got 1,700 FedEx Cup points. And if you're looking to play the absolute long game, you want guys that are going to make it into the Tour Championship, because then there's only 30 golfers left. And the demand for those cards going into that event should theoretically be highest, right? Because there's no tournament that we play that's got 30 golfers only. And it's a deluxe package or whatever payout schedule. So there's be big money to be made. So if you don't even want to enter into that, you can just start dumping off all these cards if you strategically made sure that you keep having cards in your player pool that keep advancing to the next round.
I think that's a really great point. And I'll add, like, that is when those rarity cards and numbers are really going to come into play, because there's only 30 guys to choose from. There's going to be overlap, right? You can only have so many combinations.
Yes.
Then having that, that leverage of being able to have the lower tier will get you over the top in one of these tournaments.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And that's the thing, dude. And so what I've also noticed is the resale value for this rare tier. There's 3 different types of rare NFTs. You get the one that's 120, 240, and 600. If you get a 12 edition count rare for the 12 of 600, the market value isn't going to be as high for that card because it's one of 600 versus one of 120. But that edition count still counts the exact same as a 12 of the 121, right? Like in a contest. So if you're looking to just, spend less and still have an optimal player pool, go grab a guy that's, a 12 out of 600 versus a 12 out of 120. Or do you have a different philosophy to that, Joel?
I'm with you. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're looking toward the FedEx Cup and at the end of the year when those tournaments shrink. I think that's for sure where it's going to make the biggest difference. I will say, I think the way I've attacked it for the most part, I didn't want to overburden myself with the rarities, because with these bigger tournaments, I don't feel like there's going to be ties because there's so many guys to choose from. I think you're okay with the bigger tournaments, but you're right. When you find those, when you start getting into the FedEx Cup and the 30-man tournaments, it's going to happen. And then that's the only way to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So that's that. So that's some interesting stuff. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we start diving into some players?
I think the only other thing we could talk through, if you really want to do it second, is the contest selection. How we're picking contests. Because I think that's a big one, especially once you start building, like after the first week or two, once you start building up your roster, right? You might have your main roster, the one you're going to go after the big prize with or what have you. Great. But then you'll have other cards that maybe you haven't sold for whatever reason that week that are eligible to play that week. Like we said, there's no cost to entry. So holding a card in your marketplace and your portfolio does you no good. You might as well play it if you have it. But maybe you look at your cards and you're like, my cards aren't competitive. So I'm not going to enter this in one of these tournaments with a big, first prize. I'm never going to win it. So there's still other tournaments you could enter where there's probably a lot of other people doing the same thing where you can still get something. You might as well. You have the card. And I think being wise about how you're attacking each week can be very fruitful.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Because like you mentioned earlier, there's overlay in a lot of these contests early on in this launch of this product. And if you have just a bunch of bench warmers essentially that you just want to throw into a 5-person lineup in a contest that's got overlay, that's going to guarantee you potentially just a payout in a card or a pack or a minimal amount of money, throw those guys, because it's costing you nothing to enter, right? Like we've said many times. So just having those guys in there, they can be the ultimate payoff, because you've spent hardly any money on those duds, that you've used them particularly probably for like 1 or 2 specific tournaments, and they're still kind of left over because of market value or whatever. But if you just throw them in and they're playing and there's an overlay, you can get a free elite or rare card somehow if they manage to just play okay, and sometimes it's guaranteed. So you just have to have them in.
And like a lot of people have this same strategy. So like when you see a tournament and it says, okay, maybe they pay out the top 3,000 people in a card, and maybe there's 4,000 people that enter, and you're like, well, my team's not that good. But you got to realize probably half the field is doing the same thing as you. Most of the lineups stink. You don't need to have a super competitive lineup. If you have one even decent golfer in it, that could be enough to get you that pack or whatever that you're looking for.
Yeah. So this contest I'm hovering over right now, it's the top 100 get elite packs. When they say a pack in plural, it's one card. Don't be fooled. It's a little sketchy, but it's one pack. It's one card in a pack, which is kind of bull, but there's 100 of them. So I guess maybe that's why they're saying it. And then the top 850 get just win a rare, I think. So, So I think that's what cooks in this contest. But there's 564 people that have entered already. So that seems like it's kind of growing a bit. But last week there was about 700 people out of the 850 that only entered. So you were good to go in that contest. So interesting stuff. There's also, do you play in the 3 entries or the single entries or the 150 max?
It depends on how competitive a lineup I'm able to get. If I got something that I feel really confident about, like I feel like I have someone that can win the tournament, I got some other guys, I'll go for the top prize, right, with that lineup. Whereas if I feel like I'm stringing something together mid-tier, even if it's just mid-tier guys, I'll probably go for the pack, because it's the widest range of like safety, and that you'll probably still win something. But upside, whereas if those guys play well, they have a good week, you'll still get, like, if you get the tier up pack, that's still a pretty good win. If that turns out to be a good player, a couple $100, you'll certainly take that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's the thing. It's choosing where to invest your cards is also a very important part of this. And I'm a big fan of that cash lineup one, where you just get the 3 entry, and then because not a lot of people they want the upside, right? So they want to enter their cards into a competition that they can take down. Whereas I'm totally fine just having those cards get me a little bit of money back each week, especially if I'm going to go and buy a Sungjae M for like $80, and like a top tier Sungjae M is like 170 or something. But I don't care about his rarity or anything. He's just going to pump out results for me all the time. Low investment, high output. Those are the kind of contests you probably want to put those guys into. So that's just how I think about it.
And that's a great, like, if you have that strategy, you're committed to it, you get your Sungjae M at like a good price, you play him for a few weeks, he wins you a few cards, then you move him on a week where he's playing in a tournament and he's the top guy, you make another $50 on him. You've just made all this money playing him for 4 weeks, sold him for another $50 profit. That's all profit. Now go out the next week and buy a guy you like for the next tournament.
Exactly. And then the next week you can just buy like a Max Homer using Sungjae M's money. It's like playing with house money, just rolling it over, it's a beautiful thing. Now there is a small caveat, because you can't just sell these guys for market value. There's a 10% transaction fee. There's 2 5% fees that they whack you with, which sucks, especially if it's a big card. For $200, you're getting hit with a $20 fee. So, but still, like $50 profit is still going to essentially be like 30. So that's still fine, but it is a bit of an issue, like if you think you can quickly sneak someone away. So let's take a look quickly at my model, which I pride myself over. And we've got John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Roy McIlroy, Tyrrell Hatton in 4th. So he's the first guy that's in this contest that I have in my rankings. How are you handling Tyrrell Hatton this week, Joel?
Well, definitely he's definitely the favorite this week.
Yeah.
I think what's good about this model about ReignMakers is you don't have to worry as much about him being chalky, right? You know how many of them are out there, right? You can see how many cards they have. So it's not like it is a traditional DFS where like, I don't know how chalky he'll end up being this week because he's priced up, but sometimes when guys get way too chalky, and it's like, well, I got to pivot off them. Whereas that's not the case here. Just take the best players. Don't worry about chalk because there's the exact amount of guys out there anyway. So it's pretty cut and dry. You just want to build as optimal lineup as you can. With that being said, I think Tyrrell Hatton makes a lot of sense this week. The catch-22 with him is going to be, how much do you value Tyrrell Hatton? Because if you don't like him, if you're not a Tyrrell Hatton guy, now's the time to sell him. Make the profit on the card. You can sell him at his highest price, as high as it's probably going to get. And that's a win. You'll probably make $200 if you're able to sell him this week just because his price is so high. But if you have a competitive lineup this week and you want to go after it, there's very good reason to put him in your captain spot and go after the tournament.
Okay, so you would put Tyrrell in your captain because you feel like he's obviously the safest, highest upside golfer in the field. So you're cool going with the captain because the captain spot offers a little bit of game theory to it too, because you could have 5 of the exact same guys in your lineup, but if you have the right captain, then you're looking pretty.
The captain spot matters a lot in this, to be honest, because even if you do really, like the advance last week at the match play, my lineup was great. I ended up getting third in a tournament, but I had Rom in my captain spot. Rom disappointed. And because Rom was my captain, guys were able to catch me, even though I had like 4 other guys in back. My lineup was so good, but Rom, my captain, had other guys able to catch me. So you do want to make sure that your captain is someone that produces for you, because if you miss on your captain, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. And I would just have to tilt this for 2 seconds because I had Cam Young as my captain in a lineup that had Max Homa and Patrick Cantlay. So they were just kind of made it out and then were eliminated immediately. But Cam was making so many points as a captain and then made it into the finals. And then I realized that he was going to score the same amount of points if he lost as Rory eventually landed up scoring, which was very frustrating because I thought I had the leverage spot. I made him into the finals and then he lost so many points. And then Rory still got the match bonus win and he finished up 1-up. So he got a no hole finish. And that match was like back and forth with just tons of 1 holes, which is like extra points. I was just like, oh my God, I'm just leaking money. So it is what it is. But
I agree that was a miss. That wasn't fair. I told you offline that actually helped me. But it wasn't fair because the reality is you shouldn't. Rory playing for third place shouldn't have been able to basically outscore the guy who won the tournament. It didn't make any sense. So that should have been tiered, or at least the guy who got second should have had second place points that would have surpassed him, which he didn't. But it's the match play. They probably didn't put the extra thought into it that they needed to, and they probably won't because we're not going to see another one for another year.
Ever again. Yeah. So that's the sad part, is like we were crying over legit spilt milk. There was nothing that could be done about it in the future. Cool. So looking at the marketplace, Joel. So now if you're listening on a podcast, we're going to try our best to kind of describe what's cooking here. But we've got the highest priced rare card, which is the second of the 5 rarity tiers. You got core, rare, elite, legendary, and ReignMaker. And can you just buy ReignMaker, or you have to? There's like only one of them, right?
So not all the ReignMakers, are for sale because there's so few of them. So you might not be able to find one if you're looking for it. Some of them are for sale. The problem is most of the ones for sale are mid to bottom tier, which I'm not sure you're going to win anything with. And then you got to spend at least 4 digits to get one. So it just doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense unless you win, a ReignMaker card or something. You're already partially the way there. Maybe you dive in, because the cool thing about ReignMaker is you're only competing with like 30 people. So like if you do have a competitive lineup, you have a really high probability of winning money, but it's going to cost you a pretty penny to get in there.
It's going to probably cost you close to $80K to roster a lineup, which is also fine. Like there's people that have $80K to spend. And if you want to spend $100 million on Tiger Woods, ReignMaker, feel free to do that as well. That's obviously just some guy trying to be an idiot. But so the most expensive ReignMaker on the market right now is a $14,999 Victor Hovland. And it's one of one. So that's the only Victor Hovland ReignMaker there is. So just to to jump down into the rare category, we've got a $410 Scotty Scheffler that's leading the rare market. And that $410 one is an edition count 104. And then you can see that edition count 3 goes all the way up to 650, which, that's interesting for a rare card. So what are you thinking if you take a look at the top of the board here, Joel? Are you looking to kind of sell anyone? I know we've been talking a lot about Tyrrell. Are you looking to buy any of these guys going into it? Kind of thinking ahead of the Masters. You seeing any value here in this range?
That is what I've been trying to do, is look ahead the week before, see who's in the field, and try and buy the guys I really want before that week's tournament becomes the main topic of discussion.
Yes.
All right. So right now it's the Masters. Obviously, the Masters are always a topic of discussion. But next week things are going to heat up, and prices, I think, are even going to get more competitive. If you are planning to play the Masters and you know who you like, buy them now. You'll probably get a discount before Masters week, where things are going to get juiced up. And going into Masters week more than any other tournament, you need the top guys. You're not going to get a surprise come out of nowhere, win the Masters. Like, that just is not how it goes. You're going to need to have some of these studs to compete next week. So here's where it makes sense. And so you can see, like, there is a big difference. You can go all the way to that card, that Scotty card on the right for 280. If you just want to get in the Scotty game, like, the significant discount. I mean, it's not a good rarity edition or anything, but if you just want to have Scotty in your lineup, for $130 less, you can do so.
Absolutely. And then I think if you take a look, like, just to share what we were talking about with the core and rare things quickly. So Scotty Scheffler right now, the most expensive Scotty Scheffler card is $48.99 for a core card. So, if you don't even want to get the other Scotty rare, you can just, spend $50 on a core and go from there. But then he can't be in your captain spot. And I think, like you mentioned, I think that's probably the guy you want in your captain spot going into Augusta, right?
Looking at the Masters right now, there's probably 5 guys that I can even really consider for the captain, right? Yeah. Really, after those 5, like the big 5, right? Rory, Scheffler, Rahm. I'll say Morikawa because he's had a few good showings there recently. Okay. Homa hasn't had a good showing. I love the way he's playing. He's a better player now than he was. Mm-hmm. So I like Homa. But, like, other than that, no one else is going to come out of nowhere, it feels like, and win this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the interesting part, is because there's that, like, cream of the crop, Jon Rahm and Scotty. And see, I've been really contemplating about Rory, because I just don't think the way he's been playing lately is worth the price tag of, like, $333 freaking dollars for a Rory, where he, like, I'd rather go to a Rahm who's $290. But that's also, it's weird, like, those are the big 3.
With you that I don't like Rory as much as the others. I prefer, but I'm guys that are capable of having a week that good of the Masters. He's one of them, right? I prefer the other 2, but we know his game can rise to that occasion and be very competitive at Masters week. So I'll keep him in the discussion. But if all things were the same price, everything else, I would prefer Rahm and Scheffler as well.
Yeah, and I think this one's just really, I don't know why that price is so much more expensive than the 120, but there's 280s, for a Rory, which that makes a bit more sense. $280 for a Rory versus what's going on. So yeah, I feel like just hunt down deals for those 3 guys if you're looking for them. You can't really go wrong at the Masters with either of them in your lineups. And there's the beauty of ReignMakers versus DFS is you can put all 3 of those guys in your lineup. Right, you can start a lineup with Scotty Scheffler, Jon Rahm, and Rory McIlroy, and that's just like a freight train of points, which is going to cost you a little bit, but that's what other people are going to be doing, right? So you got to either get with it or spend less and hope for a bad week. Like, that's kind of the 2 approaches you can do. But like you mentioned, it's very chalky at Augusta, and we know that history there is very depictive of what can happen. So,
and you're right.
Is the right. Yeah,
you can. There are going to be some guys that do that, and I don't think the optimal lineup that you can put together is going to win, right? Like, probably not. I don't think it's just get the best players. You have to be intelligent about it. But I do think you're probably going to need at least 2 of them, right? At least 2 of them are probably going to be in that top 5. So you got to be able to be competitive, at least for Masters weekend, making sure you get at least a couple of those guys, hit your captain right, and then you'll be in a good position. And then if you want to take a shot on someone like Corey Connors, who's done well at the Masters, had a good showing, maybe he pops for a week, like you could get away with doing something like that.
Yeah. Because Corey Connors right now, for a rare Corey Connors, for a 120 count edition Corey Connors, that's 28 edition count, is $103, which is a quarter of the price of Scotty. And we've seen what Corey can do at Augusta, right? And we saw what he got up to at match play, played quite nicely and just lost to the freight train that was Cam Young. But he's also going to be playing this week. So you can get like a bit of a double dip where you can purchase him now and then potentially land up cashing in on both of his good performances, or you waste your money and he doesn't, But
so real quick, I want to do a quick test. If you go back to Corey Connors, I actually do think his price right now is probably a little inflated because he did have a good showing last week.
Mm-hmm.
He is playing in the next 2 tournaments. He probably is one of the favorites, at least top 10 or so for this upcoming week.
Yeah.
So if you scroll down, click on the sales button up a little bit, and let's just see what he's been going for. So he last sold for a 110, 99, 111, 125, 99, and then so down a little bit to
look at this.
75.
On the 21st, it was $70.
Yeah, so that's about a week ago. So I think this week his price went up to about a $30 raise in average asking price. If you get him in that 60 to 70 range, that's a steal. Go grab him, play him for 2 weeks. You probably get that back at the least. If you got to pay 100, then you probably got to make some money on him for it to pay off.
Basically. And I think that's the thing. That's if you are proactive and planning ahead, you can just really get advantage of these cards. So it's intriguing, dude. I love that. You got to be so organized and on the mark and trying to figure out who's going to play in an event, because that's the tough part, is trying to figure out what these guys' schedules are. But the nice thing is we've got all these elevated events that really pull all these guys together. So there's not too many events where a Tyrrell Hatton is the only guy in the field with a Hideki. So that's interesting. Let's keep scooting down this board here and see if we can find any guys that like we think is good value. We might not be playing this week that people have overlooked for the Masters so far, right?
And what we do, another thing to keep in mind and to look at for these tournaments is it's rare, but not every golfer has a card. So there's no Jordan Spieth. You can't play Spieth. So even if you really like Spieth with me, nobody can play him. So even if he wins the tournament, no one's getting that benefit because he can't be out there, right? Ricky Fowler doesn't have a card, which is a big one for this week because he's playing well. I actually like Ricky Fowler a good deal this week, but he's not going to be in ReignMakers. There's no card of him. So keep those things in mind while you're doing your search.
No, that's very valid, Joel, and it's really interesting because I think Spieth would be a very popular card. Like everyone loves him, and he's starting to play well again. So that would just really be peculiar to see how he could go around. But we've got a Max Homa sitting for $200, $199. JT for $199. Patrick Cantley $194. Cameron Young $188, and Xander $183. And then we'll just throw in a Colin as well for $179. So all 6 of those guys are sitting between $180 and $200. While we've got Scotty Scheffler sitting at $410, Rory sitting at $300, $270. I personally bought 2 Cam Youngs like before the match play, which has been beautiful now. So that's essentially just paid off itself in value already because he's going to be looking pretty going into Augusta. I think everyone's going to want him, and I don't know what I'm going to do with him. I think I'm going to have to play him. I don't want to sell him yet, because I think he's got the potential to become a top 5 player in the world, right? Which is something that you also, if you think about a golfer who has the potential to just explode and be a top 10 golfer in the world, and are they $50 right now on a rare card?
Probably not. No, you probably,
or like call it 75 to 100. Those are the guys you're trying to identify. And take a chance on with the upside. So I don't know. It's interesting. So who do you like in this range? Who's a person that you think is overpriced? Who you think's underpriced? I definitely thought when JT was going at 250 at the Valspar, it was like, oh boy, like people still don't know what's going on here. But now that he's sitting at 200, I think that's fair for him. He's now outside the top 10 in the world. So, woof.
But I think 250 at the Valspar at that week was fair because he was so by far the best golfer in that field, right? In terms of pedigree, that you needed to pay a premium to get him into your lineup for that week. Right now, that's going to regulate. And so I think that's going to come back. Like that's what we're trying to hide this week with Terrell Hatton, right? Like not quite as much as JT was at the Valspar, but he is the best pedigree in this field. You're not going to see that very often. So there's going to be a premium on his price. Do you want to have the most competitive lineup you can build and go get him and pay a little bit of a premium? You got to go do that. Or would you rather just make the money on them if you have them and go put it together a different type of lineup, which is another, I think, sound strategy. It depends on how you want to play it.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on, Joel. It's so fun, man. The thing is, it's like, so we've got Augusta and then we've got the RBC Heritage at Harbour Town, and that's another elevated event. So it's tough to kind of think that you're going to have to find the guys that never played in Augusta or this week that are sitting right outside that Augusta cut line. I think those would be guys we want to target. And we probably should have prepped for that a little bit, but maybe as we keep scrolling, we can find them. But if I were to pick someone in this range that I think is slightly underpriced, I would say Tony Finau at 175. I mean, the guy just reps out top 20s. He's not going to really give you that many top 5s, or whatever. Like you decide on what you think Tony's upside is, but I think his consistency and his value compared to, like, is Tony Finau worth only $20 more than Terrell Hatton in this current market? Like, Tony's not even playing this week.
Here's a good example I'll give you. If you knew that this year, which we don't know, but let's just assume that we knew that this year was going to turn out like last year, and there'd be a run of events toward the end of the year where Tony Finau, and obviously he ended up having a string of wins, but just pre-event, before you knew he was going to win, just look at where he stood in that field. Tony Finau, and then it was like Punta Cana and Tony. Finau, right? Like his card value would be up to 225, 250 because he's just so much better in the field. So if you knew that was going to happen, where you would have Tony Finau in these JV events, then his value is going to be, infinitely more. And having him now and then waiting till then gives you that option. If he's playing well, you want to roll that and he will win a few tournaments, great. If he's not playing as well, you don't have your confidence, sell the card. It'll still be going for a premium because of how much better he would be than the field. And those are the types of the guys you want to look for. It's like, who's an upper echelon golfer that will play those events when the other guys take the week off and will still be out there and will give me an edge in that tournament?
Yes. A home favorite or a Texas guy, but we're not really seeing any of these Texas dudes that are, Jordan's not, but he's not even on the thing. But that's a great point too. You got to do research on that stuff and try and figure out what these, like if Steve Stricker, for example, and Zach Johnson, those kind of guys. I'm just struggling to come up with a person that I'm looking at that does that kind of stuff. Like the RBC guys, like, is the RBC Canada going on this year? Like if someone's sponsored by RBC, are they going to be playing in that event, even though it's not elevated? So
a good example is, what's that tournament? The Wyndham, right? Yes. Webb Simpson Classic. Webb Simpson always happens. Right? Like, but if you know you want to go for that tournament, you go a month ahead, get your Webb Simpson, because by the time that week comes, that price is going to skyrocket because everyone's going to play Webb Simpson the week of the Wyndham Classic.
Yes, dude. So I also grabbed Charlie Hoffman as an elite card because I think I got it for $55, and I managed to sell it for $77 in the space of a day. Some guy just bought 15 Charlie Hoffmans in a go. I went and saw what his profile looked like, and he's picked up all the Charlie Hoffmans because he's got a great course history at the Valero. So this guy just buying up every single Charlie Hoffman there was. So I was like, all right, this guy just made me like $15 just for having the card. So shout out to that dude. I know, and he's got like a dozen Charlie Hoffmans now. So I don't know if he plays well this week, he's going to be in good shape. So I don't know what's going to go on there.
It's an interesting strategy.
Yeah, it is. Very, very, very. Sam Burns, he's going at 140 and he's just recently won. I feel like that's not nearly as overinflated as I expected. But then we've got like a Patrick Cantley here for cheap at 140 as well. I feel like Cantley's so consistent. Jason Day, Sung Jae Im, here's what I was talking about. Like he's $116 and he plays in every goddamn tournament. He doesn't care about elevated events or anything like that. So that's something you have to bear in mind. He's most likely going to accumulate more than enough FedEx points to make the top 30 just because of sheer volume. So he's like a blue chip dividend play for me, which I think I'm going to use Sung Jae as someone I just try and get as many as I can and have him in all my lineups because he's going to be playing in so many events. You know, like I think I love Sung Jae as a play.
I think your logic there is sound, right? Because the idea is that if you just blindly played Sung Jae as many tournaments, knowing he's going to just play more tournaments than people, and he's a pretty good golfer, he's going to get you decent results, right? That even if it's small, that's going to return you money every week, and that return of money, like we said, you're not losing anything by entering. Just by having the card, you can go out there, return a little bit of money each tournament he plays in, and then one day later in the year, you find a good spot to sell him back, and then you've just profited.
Bang. I totally agree, dude. I love that principle. I think we stumbled upon a little thing there, and you don't even have to buy the best rarities again. Like I said, you know, like just buy cheap Sung Jaes. There's definitely ones out there. Let's keep on scooting down the board, yeah. So we can maybe, like, if I had a Matthew Fitzpatrick card right now, I'm probably selling that thing as hard as I can, you know. But I don't because what do you think?
I do have Matthew Fitzpatrick, and that was my initial instinct was to sell, but now I'm really. You're not going to get a good price for him.
Okay.
Like if I could get him at his value, I would sell it in a heartbeat. But because he's hurt, he's not playing well. No one wants him right now. So now I'm thinking, is he shot forever? Probably not. Let me hold out. Maybe he'll come back, have a good result. What it takes him to have one top 10 before people think he'll back, and then let me try and move him and get the proper value versus trying to sell him undervalue right now.
Exactly. And I think that's a great point too, is trying to limit your losses on the market when you sell cards back. Just keep them. It doesn't cost you anything to keep them for a little more. Maybe the value will go down even more a bit, but the chances are if they're pretty much market minimum already, they're not going to get much worse. So all it takes is one overreaction from one event, and you can quite quickly capitalize on that. And you would have him in your lineups after the people are overreacting to his good performance, right? So that's the cool part about it too, is all of that. So we've got one of our very first guys that I think I remember is playing this week is Siwoo at $90, Joel.
So it's definitely inflated. I mean, look at the names around him, right? It's Siwoo surrounded by Hovland. Wyndham Clark seems a little high there, but Sung Jae, Finau, those are all better guys than Siwoo. But Siwoo is probably a top 5 to 10 option this week. So you're going to have to pay a little bit of a premium to get him in your lineup. I'm okay with the 90. I think I would if I'm going to go out and get Siwoo this week. I think my expectation would be that I'm going to probably lose at least $20 to $30 on that card. But if I have a competitive enough lineup where he's my missing piece, you know, am I willing to make a $20 to $30 investment to complete that lineup?
Right. And dude, so Siwoo, he's interesting though, because he might just be a guy that you grab that you might not even have to sell back again because he's playing some solid golf. I've got him ranked as like the top 20 ReignMaker, 19th in my rankings. And when you put him in this field, 14th, I've got him slated for $116 market value. Now, these are very rough numbers. I just try and put them in here so I can figure out what I think, you know, I'll say, okay, so 116 is probably a little spendy. I think maybe Siwoo's a fair price of 100. But he's the 14th best guy in my model, and he's got a ton of FedEx Cup points already compared to like everybody else. So he's going to be around in those final events. And if you want to grab a Siwoo now, he's going to give you a top 5 upside this week, and he's going to be playing in the Masters, and his value could land up going up to 150 by the end of the year. You know, like you never know.
And if he does have a great week and he goes out, wins the tournament, gets second, makes you some money, then you'll make money on the card because someone will overreact to that and they'll buy him. So like that's probably the time to sell. You go win some money on him. People are high on him. Sell him for maybe 120, get that profit, and you've made money.
Yeah. So Joel, do you list all your cards all the time, or do you just list them specifically when you think, okay, I want to get my guy out, or how do you go about listing your cards?
Yeah, it's a good question. So right now, I'm prepping Masters, right? So anyone I'm considering for Masters or the upcoming week, I'm not listing yet. And then I have this weird. I have a lot of cards, so I have this weird kind of range of guys, like the example of Matthew Fitzpatrick, where I'm not high on him right now, obviously,
Yeah.
but I don't want to sell low. I just doesn't feel like the right time. I feel like I don't think he's done. I think he's going to have a resurgence at some point this season, and I think I'm better off waiting for that to then kind of get my value back than to sell low. So I probably have a handful of guys. Like an example, I think I said earlier in the show, Billy Horschel, who's just not playing this week, and he hasn't been in his best form. At some point this year, Billy Horschel is going to have a good showing. Let me get him there, maybe play him in that tournament, and then move him there instead of doing it now where there's probably not much value to be found.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And it doesn't make sense to sell guys at a loss, unless they're injured and you need to like try and be the first person to sell the guy, right? Like if they have like season-ending injury, which is going to happen to someone at some point, that's kind of expensive, and that's going to be fun because you got to monitor the market. You got to pay attention to news, like way more important than anything else. So maybe if you spend a little bit of money for the Patreon account, that's like that PGA injury report on Twitter. Those guys are on top of all the injuries. If you see that a guy's got a niggle, then maybe you have to sell him ahead of the time and maybe take a $20 loss to avoid losing 70, right? So it is what it is. Darbo Sweet Spot DFS in the house. What's up, Darbo? Cool. So Chris Kirk is a guy I like this week too. I think he's also like $85 for a nice 120 count there. What's his listing? Yeah, it's sitting at a 96. So yeah, you can get a 64 for 90. What would you say, Joel? I know we're kind of going along players here and stuff, but if you looked at this 96 edition count versus 64, there's a $5 difference, 85 to 90. Do you go to the 91 or do you go to the cheaper one?
Honestly, my thought process would revolve around two things. How does the rest of my lineup look, right? If I already have low-tiered guys, edition guys in my lineup, it probably won't matter as much, So I would take it there, but for $5, it's that's not going to make a huge difference. So
yeah, but also is like 30 edition counts really gonna? Because that's the thing I'm trying to think about is how often are you really going to tie as well, but also like you said, if you putting yourself into those high stakes tournaments, you don't even want to take that gamble, dude. Like a $5 premium to potentially avoid halving, because you don't halve it. You just get straight up bumped down to the next price point in this contest. You're not splitting the contest. Yep. The guy with the lowest edition count gets first place. The next guy goes into second. It's not even like halved. So that's brutal. So you got to get those edition count points.
Well, I think that the part of that thought process, I think really you have to look at the lineup you're putting out there, right? Like, so for example, we're talking about guys right now that are five of the guys we've discussed so far are top tier guys for this upcoming tournament. If you're going to play five of those guys, you probably need a lower edition count because there's going to be a handful of people that are going out there and getting the optimal lineup they can put together that you'll need to be competitive on, right? If you're going to play even just one guy that's, a little further down the board, a mid-tier range guy, much less chance that's going to be duplicated. I wouldn't worry about the edition count as much, depending on. So if you're going to go for as optimal lineup as you can, then I think it matters. If you're going to like sprinkle in somebody that could be a little bit lower down the board, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah. And all you can do is put the same, you just take the least likely guy and you make him your captain. Take a chance on that too, because that'll change the amount of points that you make anyway. So it is interesting that they do that. They show you who's rostered and who's rostered as a captain. And you can like really see what's cooking there. Davis Riley this week, $70. He's interesting. Hideki sitting at $67, dude. Like going into Augusta, a $70 Hideki, and you get to play him this week too, maybe. Like are we going to Hideki? Because I mean, look at the guys around him here at $70. We got another Chris Kirk, we got Justin Suh, Taylor Montgomery, Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry. I think, Hideki, when he is playing, is better than Shane, at least right now. But that's the thing with Hideki is you just never know if he's going to absolutely nuke your lineup.
Hideki is hit or miss. I agree. That $66 Hideki price does seem like a good deal for what you're getting for him, especially knowing he'll be pretty useful for the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He's not just this week, but you play him at the Masters next week too. Comparing him to I think those guys at around $90 to $100, I'm fine with. So I think you're getting a deal. The one thing I would do though, click on let's say Hideki's name. So if you go on the left side of the athlete name,
yeah,
open Hideki. And just make sure. So like when you look at them, is there a lower tier? So like there's $100 decky and there's a 66. So before you buy anyone, just go in and look what else is out there. And you still, like we said, you might want the lower edition, you might want the more expensive card. That's fine, but at least see, right? Like if you might not even notice that there's another card out there that's going for $30 less.
Absolutely. And I think the way to start searching for guys, if you want, you just toggle. There's this toggle, that groups by rarity, and then it will show you the cheapest card of that tier. So it might be even, between 600 and 120, it doesn't matter. It's just going to show you the cheapest one, and it won't show you all the other options. So once you see, okay, this is the cheapest card, then you can untoggle it or click on that guy and go hunting for different specifics within that person's name, which I think is an interesting way to quickly kind of see who's a value and who's not. So, see where the same price as Fitz as the cheapest card is interesting, right? It's just like, they're not the same player, but they're the same price. It's really cool. Taylor Montgomery is a guy that's interesting to me. So much points, but is he ever going to win a tournament, Joel? That's the question.
So, I like Taylor Montgomery, but I liked him more as the mid-tier sleeper that like no one was on, that was like playing really well. I think he's kind of evolved into like a upper tier type guy now. And as an upper tier guy, I don't dislike him. He's not as attractive anymore as he was as like the mid-tier guy that I was able to get at a discount. So, if I was getting Taylor Montgomery at 50 or below, I would probably still hop on it. At 64, I think it's probably the right price. But if you like him, go for it. It's not something I feel like you need to jump on.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big believer in the long term for Sahith. I think he's going to be, and he's priced at 55 right now for one of the cheapest cards you can find for Sahith, and you can get a $64 90 edition count, which I think is really fair, especially because he's so volatile, and he's the kind of guy that you can keep in your lineups. Just wait, and he's going to. If you go look at his data golf, he's got multiple top 5 finishes. Like he pops just out of nowhere. And then you can instantly sell him the week after that. I think he provides a lot of long-term upside and, that short-term pop too.
I have no way to like, I don't have any data showing this, but he just feels like the type of guy that's going to have a few tournaments this week where like he's the alpha, where, it'll be a weaker field and he's going to be the headliner. So he'll probably play in some of those tournaments where a lot of the big guys take off. Again, we don't know that for sure, but it just seems like something that will probably end up happening at some point this season.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you go take a look at Data Golf's website, which is awesome, they have that good shot rate. 1 out of every 5 shots he hits is inside 6.5 feet with the wedge. Like he's the best wedge player in the world this year so far. And he's just been putting really bad. Like I had him in lineups, and then he had a 6-foot putt on 17 to ice the match essentially. Whoever he was playing against made it, and he missed. And then they went into the final hole tied, and then he lost in the final hole. I couldn't believe what he did, Joel. I had him in 60% of my lineups, had him in so many ReignMakers. Like, if he just made it through, I was looking pretty. And then his putting has just been really bad lately. So I think what I have in my model there is this trajectory of what your strokes gained looked like over the last 150, 24 rounds. Is it going up? And then I have ball striking and short game. Which one is driving that? Like, is the short game making your strokes gain go up? And if that's the case, then you can like sell high on that guy, unless it's like someone like Sam Ryder, who's just been putting out of his mind for a long time now. But if you have a guy that putts quick and has a good performance with the putting, you can like sell him on top of that, because that might not be sustainable. But if it's the ball striking that's driving the strokes gained, I'm kind of looking to buy that guy as like a long-term prospect, right? Because the putting might come or it might not, but ball striking is sustainable. That's just my philosophy. That's what I'm thinking. So
I love that. I think it's a really good philosophy. I would definitely align with that, because exactly what you said, right? You can rely more on the ball strikers. That's more consistent. And I had the same thought process.
Yeah.
I don't know what Sam Ryder is doing right now with this putting. It's amazing that he continues to just sink putts left and right, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be able to be sustained over the course of
I know, but it's, dude, over the last 36 rounds, he leads the tour. Like, it's been since the year started. He's just like he's like Cam Smith, just like walking around like Cam Smith right now. There's no one even close to him. let's go bargain hunting here, Joel. See if we can find a few guys that maybe we can suggest for some that are playing this week. Like a Garrick Higo. To me, I've got him graded really high because he's also won an event. So he's going to be in all of those elite elevated events. What is his price? Is there anyone that you got your eye on like a little bit lower? Like Garrick Higo is $15 for a rare right now. He's playing this week. And I think, is he playing in the Masters? Let's take a look here.
I don't know yet.
He's not in the Masters, so that's not good. So you're just getting for this week, which that's the thing, you know. But $15 for this week, a nice little rental. He'll definitely be playing in the RBC Heritage the week after. So, you know, that's a nice little bump. But
what about like Brendan Todd?
Brendan Todd, yes. Where is he? Yeah, he's 32nd in my model long term, 27th for short term. You know, love his power ranking here for the event. So he's probably what a top guy. Brendan Todd. Yeah, what, he's 15th in my model this week. So love him. And what's his price gonna be this week? Brendan, I think he's like sitting, yeah, what, Jesus, $22.
Yeah. So I mean, that's
15.
If you want to get, you can make a competitive lineup this week for probably 4 cards at around $20 to $25, right? You can get in this week for about $100 if you wanted, and have a pretty decent lineup. You'd have to hit on one of these, you know, mid to lower tier guys like Brandon Todd to have like a top 5 really good showing, and then get, you know, maybe one of Hideki or Hatton as your core card, which you probably get, and again, for a pretty good price. And right there, you have a very competitive lineup that you can put in a rare tournament that will be different enough because you're not putting, you know, your Hatton or whatever in your main captain spot. And it's not going to cost you that much. And even if you miss at these prices, like even if Todd has a horrible week, you'll probably still get back at least $15 for him next week.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not like a guy's going to go from $22 and then be $2 the next week, you know, like it's only going to be a few bucks down. Someone I think is still marginally underpriced this week is Matt Kuchar, $35. It's a little spendy, but Valero, high course history correlation. Kuchar's finished inside the top 12 the last 3 times he's played there. This week's field is probably arguably even more watered down than normal. And I mean, the guy's playing good golf. I mean, he just made it through the groups, hung in there with Jay Day, you know, on a course that if you picked Jason Day versus Matt Kuchar, 10 out of 10 rounds. I mean, Jay Day's winning 9 out of 10, right? Like, and he still hung in there. So especially the way Jason Day's playing right now. So I think I like him at this course. He plays really good in Texas. So Matt Kuchar is someone I really like. And then, like someone like Alex Noren, I don't know what his price is, but he's also someone that not a lot of people like to talk about, or he's technically like a Europeaner. $30, you know, like also. So you, like you said, you can, if you even go $150 this week, you know, that's 5 $30 dudes, which is very affordable. But then you can get a Hatton for $20 in the core market and just throw him in as your core, right?
And the biggest thing to keep in mind is that even if when you tell yourself it's $150, that money, a lot of that money can be recouped, right? It's not $150 out the window. It's $150 invested that you might, depending on how you do, make $200 on the next week, or maybe you lose $50. Either way, it's not $150 down the drain.
Exactly. So looking at a rare contest here, there's going to be the bankroll booster here that we've got 68 people have only entered so far, and the top 50 win $50. So if you somehow manage to sneak in through that bankroll builder there, you've paid for a third of your lineup, and you can sell all those cards at a wash, basically, you know, like if they go down in value even. So, and if you keep them, because there's going to be the RBC Heritage, I think a lot of those guys that we just looked at, Brendan Todd, Matt Kuchar, those are all RBC Heritage type players, which I think are real, you know, the short hitters, nice short game. I like them a lot. And then you can put them in that card, try win some cards, or the single entry, which pays out $1.5K to first. which is nice. But that's, as you can see, has got almost double the entries already as compared to the bankroll builder. So it's like we were talking about.
It's also an important thing to do when you do pick these tournaments. Make sure you look not only at the entries, but how many places get paid. So you can click in and you can see, right, if the single entry pays out. Let's see how many it pays out. It goes down to.
Oh, that's actually a lot better than last week. So it pays out to the top 60. 25.
So you only get 25, right? Whereas in the other one, you would get
50,
right? But it's almost the same amount of places. Now, obviously, there's a lot more people. So you got to see where the numbers end up in the tournament. But if they're anywhere close, right, I would probably prefer the one with some upside because, it's, pretty similar. But if there ends up being half the people, there's a much higher likelihood you'll win in the top 50. So that's something just to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and from what I've noticed is there'll definitely be a few more like maybe whatever, the single entry will have a higher amount of people involved than your 3-entry max, because if you're going to min cash in that single entry, you're min cashing for $25, whereas this other min cash is 50. And you can throw in all those low edition cards. So it's really cool. You can pick your own investment strategy. You can pick your own way to go about this. Like you can be a guy that's trying to just shoot for the stars, and you can also do, like a blue chip, just churn out profits little bits by little bits. So
the really cool stuff with contest selection is I have seen the last couple of weeks that a lot of people do wait till the last minute to enter their lineup. So, I know I'll be looking the night before and it looks like, oh, well, it's going to be a lot of overlay. And then all of a sudden, 300 people are added right before the tournament started. So keep that in mind that there's always room for people to kind of put lineups in last minute.
Yes. No, that's also a very good point. And the thing about this is I don't know if there's like optimizers and CSV sheets that you can upload. So if you're looking to enter 150 lineups, you have to build them by hand.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to have so many cards to build.
Right. I know, but that's also like the thing is like, it's not even, is it even worth your time to have that many cards, right? Like it's because you can't like optimize lineups. You have to literally build them by hand, which I like the idea of the single entry and 3 entries, which is.
Well, even beyond that, right? So the guys who, are able to basically build the optimal lineups and everything, even if they do that in a single entry, they can only do it once, right? So, if you're in a single entry, those guys that have all the best cards, they only can put their one best foot forward in that tournament, just like you can.
Right. And there's only that many of those optimal lineups available because of the amount of cards out there, which is also interesting.
It's awesome. A different way to think about chalk, right? Because, there's only so many available options.
Yeah. And that is the one thing that is the difference between core and rare. And then I think elite, legendary, and ReignMaker is the amount of cards that can enter the market for core and rare tiers is unlimited. There's not a cap. Whereas elite, once you've purchased a card, that's going to be one of 60 or one of 75, I believe.
Yep.
Just from what I've understood talking to my boy Mike last week about this stuff. So, that's another reason to spend that extra money, because you're guaranteeing yourself rarity, and it's another way to try and make money in the long run. So is there anything else you want to chat about, Joel?
If you're going for it, they haven't put all the details out, but if you're going for a ticket into the ReignMaker's World Championship, I believe I read it's going to be the rare tier. No, elite tier.
Elite.
So that's, if you're going to win something like that, you got to find a way to get it a competitive elite lineup.
There we go. Yeah. And that makes sense. I think that's a solid, it's the big boy range, and I like it. So that's my goal, is to have at least 4 lineups of elites that I've dangled my way into by the end of the year. So through just selling and buying rares and using them to contests. So it's going to be fun, Joel. I can't wait. And I'm sure we'll hash out some more specifics and try and do this as much as we can going forward each week, because I think it's fun.
It's a lot of fun. If you haven't gotten involved yet and you like playing DFS PGA, you're going to like it. I promise you, you're going to like it. I understand it is a little confusing at first, and it's a little nerve-wracking to dive in. You can start small, get your feet wet, just get a base for it. After a week or two, you'll understand it and you'll be hooked just like we are. And like you said, we'll be back. We're coming back. We're going to talk about the marketplace. We're going to talk about who we're buying, how we're doing. So stay tuned.
Yes. And feel free to reach out to me at the Model Maniac and Joel at Draftmaster Flex. We'll be more than happy to. I know I'm sure Joel will too. I haven't asked him, but I'm sure he'll be happy to answer all your questions that you have for him. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, folks. And I'll be back tomorrow for my solo show. And Joel and I will be back in the future for another ReignMaker session for sure. And many, many more. So till next time, we'll catch you guys later. Linda Q and Joel out.